Let's check out the solution challenge.
Let's do this.
Okay, I'll present my screen.
Welcome to the Google Developer Student Club's 2021 Solution Challenge. The mission of this challenge is to use Google technology to solve for one of the United Nations' 17 Sustainable Development Goals, aiming to end poverty, ensure prosperity, and protect the planet. Win cool prizes, mentorship from Google, and swag. Get help along the way from Google at training events, code labs, and hackathons. Submit your solution by March 31st, 2021. Register today. We can't wait to see what you build.
Let's get started.
Developer student clubs are university-based communities where students learn about Google technology and use their skills to solve local problems. Welcome to the Developer Student Club's 2020 Solution Challenge Demo Day.
I want to be a developer who helps my friends and share knowledge to my friends who are deaf. I really want to learn Android deeper to make new applications that will help my friends with disabilities. There are lots of new things here that I really like, but the most thing that I like is the accessibility sandbox who has live transcribe and live caption. The application will help me, especially in class. When I don't have a volunteer next to me, I will put my application in front of me and then it will translate what the lecturer is saying. I'm really happy to see new people across the world with amazing stories. I really want to thank all who come to me and say that I inspired them, because it inspires me more.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Solution Design Day, Day 2 UX and Product Design. I'm 𝗦𝗫𝗂𝘂𝘁𝗶𝗂𝘀, the creative lead of 𝗦𝗫𝗂𝘂𝘁𝗶 Caloocan. I know we're getting excited about our program proper, but first, let me review a reminder for today. Random codes will be given at a random part of the program, so make sure to take note of the 3 event codes as you will be submitting it at the end of the program for you to qualify for a certificate. Now, let's get right into our main event. So in this workshop, we'll be discussing visual and product design and getting practice in the skills required for both disciplines. Let's get to know who will be sharing his expertise for today. He is a co-founder and CDO of Abstract Digital, a digital product design agency with particular expertise in facilitating design sprints for venture-backed, seed-stage startups in Southeast Asia. He enjoys designing interfaces, writing front-end markup, and co-organizing local design events like the UXPH Roadshow, Visual 4, and Sketch and Dribbble. He also has worked with brands like 500 Startups, Rocket Internet, the World Bank, and the Presidential Communications Office. In his spare time, he loves attending web conferences, mentoring designers, and playing video games with his toddler. So let's all welcome Mr. Francis Alturas.
Hey, hi everyone. So yeah, thanks for the intro. I'm Francis. So I'm just gonna share my screen. Just give me a sec. Uh, uh, um. All right, there we go. Let me just hide this things here. All right, we can't hide the filter above, but yeah, it works. Anyways, um, right, guys. So hi everyone. Thanks for inviting me here today. I'm Francis. So I run a company called Abstract Digital. Um, we basically design MVPs for venture-backed startups, Southeast Asia, and yeah, we love doing design sprints. And this is the team. This is our office before the pandemic happened. So yeah, everyone's working remotely. We love product design. These are some of the work that we've been doing. And in my spare time, I actually enjoy organizing design events locally, empowering the design community. And I also enjoy speaking in conferences, attending conferences, organizing them, anything related to design and coding. So yeah, I mean, that's just me in a nutshell. Today, I'm going to talk about how to hack design. So I think basically how to cheat at UI design specifically. And it's a bit tricky to teach this because these are things that you can just Google, but without actually seeing like the thought process of applying these tips, it will be so challenging for you to do the same. So what I'm about to talk today would be bite-sized tips and tricks to improve your user interface. So let's get started. So I think we need to work with a sample here. So I took this random airline site here in the Philippines, and this is what we're gonna be working with today. So there's nothing bad about it. It's good. It's working. Um, but this will be our guinea pig on applying these tips and tricks that I have. So yeah. Um, that's tip number one. So use good photos. You see the background photos here. It looks a bit blurry, cropped weird in a weird way. I think maybe we can improve it. So one of the go-tos that I usually sites that I usually get good quality stock photos would be from Unsplash, and they have it for free. There is a lot of paid other services, but I mainly get it from Unsplash, and I'm using Figma as my main UI design tool. So there is a plugin under the Figma community plugins. You can download Unsplash, and then immediately inside the interface, you can actually just type airplane, since it's an airline company, and I want a background about airplanes. So I just search there, and then here's how it looks. All right, so now it looks a bit better, right? Now it looks like an airline company. Okay, so what else can we do here? Typically, we read from left to right, and with the main jobs to be done or call to action is actually for you users to just book or search flights. The information on the right uh, left is left unnoticed, um, which is probably why they made it the typography big and it has a colored background. So I tried to swap it. Anyways, your eye is naturally drawn to the bigger element here on the right, which is your main call to action. But we don't want people to miss reading this important information on the left. So yeah. All right. Next tip. You don't have to fill the whole screen. Now, during the early days, I've been using 960 grid, which is a grid system during that time for majority of the resolutions around that time. And I think that was 10 years ago. So here's like a some statistics on the desktop screen resolutions being used for the last 10 years. And let's just zoom in on three main resolutions that died and grew. So basically, 960 grid applied on a 1024 by 768 resolution. These are your typical CRT monitors, the monitors with something on their backs. And you can see how adoption died because of the rise of high fidelity screens and bigger resolution monitors. So you can see there's a good chunk of adoption on these other two resolution sizes, which is the orange and the black lines. So as these times changes, so does the grid that I'm using. So just an illustrative example of why you don't need to fill up the whole space. So this is actually a Medium site. It's a blog site with all articles, and just reading a single line, a single sentence here, it's super long. It would really tire your eyes just trying to scan that, and like psychologically, it makes us feel like we're reading something extremely long. But when we try to shorten it to something like this, suddenly the article becomes much more shorter. It feels shorter, and it feels like something that you can consume easily. So that is one good tip. So you don't have to fill up the whole space. So add a lot of white space, people. So we're gonna do the same for this site. So we're not gonna fill up the whole thing. And there we go. So this is us applying a grid. Specifically, I'm using Bootstrap 4 grid, which has a width of 1140. My gutter is actually around 30 pixels, and each column width is around 65. But it really depends on what you're using. If you want to use Foundation, if you're using custom grids, that's fine as well. I think the most important part is to be, if you're just a designer and you're not sure of how to implement it, it's best to actually have a conversation with your developer on the approach and the framework so they can plan ahead too. So yeah, this is Bootstrap and I'm using its grids. So yeah, tip number 3, give text consistent contrast. So I think one of the things that we can improve here is that layout feels too blocky. Like I see too much rectangles here. Like I know that this is a header title here on the left, and there is a supporting text and a call to action there. and I want to keep it a little less boxy. So I think one of the efforts as well to make it readable and have that contrast is by putting that dark blue background on the text. But yeah, the layout just feels too blocky. So I'm gonna remove that block, and then we're ending up with a text with a real hero title banner here. And I think one of the problems we face is that it's hard to read. It's hard to read. How can we fix this? So we can also improve saturation by adding a dark shade on the background. And I want to keep it branded, so I'm going to use the navy blue um, color from this brand. And here is just one of the tricks that I usually do. So if I have an image, I just set saturation to 0 because I don't want any color from the original from the original image to bleed out. And I want to use the brand color instead. So you can play around 70 to 90 on a multiply uh, blend mode. So yeah, so this is what we get, which is better, but I feel like it's too strong, so I want to tone down that a bit. So there we go. All right, so we have a background here. It's airline related. It's not like too much, but it's just enough, and it gives us the right contrast for our text. So it's totally readable compared to actually having this. So all right. Yeah, like also what I mentioned earlier, the layout feels too blocky. So just because it's a nav bar, it doesn't have to be a bar. So I'm picking off the bar and just letting it blend through the layout. So yeah, just a simple remove of the bar, and it makes all that difference. And of course, adding some white space to make it breathe. And there we go. Looks a bit better now. All right. Tip number 4, establish a type scale. So I think a lot of people or designers, when they start designing and you start making a layout, and you'll be like nudging between 15, 14, or 16 point pixels of type size. And it really takes so much time, especially if you have a lot to design. So here's one quick way to not think too much of that. You can use a type scale, but I don't really recommend it. It looks really good in theory. It's super helpful, but in practice, I really hate like magic numbers. You can see there's a lot of magic numbers here. 31.25 pixels, like something like that. It's too complicated. Although it operates on a scale, like you can use a golden ratio scale to make it look uh, aesthetically pleasing, but it it I'm not really comfortable with it in practice. And yeah, I don't like the magic numbers. So what instead you can do is just establish your own space and sizing system. So you can have a baseline. Of course, it really depends on the type as well and the layout in the medium that you're using. But having something already in place like 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 24, 30, and so on, it just speeds up your decision making. So you're not really that you don't waste too much time just nudging up and down, trying to find the perfect size. You can just immediately grab and use it. So this is an example of how I used it in a mobile, in a design system rather. So I just immediately set up the headings and the button sizes and the body sizes. And of course, I just manipulate it as I go. These are just some baselines. It's not the final thing because a lot of things change when you start actually designing the actual thing. So yeah, so let's apply that. I want to have a proper type scale so everything looks consistent in our type. So let's work on that hero type there on top, header type. So there, it looks a bit better. We'll be applying the rest of the type scale later on. So yeah. Moving into tip number 5, So supercharge the defaults. So just because it's a default radio button, it has to look like all other default radio buttons. So I think this is a similar approach to a lot of apps. So you can see here, this is a radio button, and I want to supercharge it. So you can see that I actually made it bigger. The clicking area is a bit bigger, so it's not much harder compared to the smaller one. Yeah, other things we can play around with this. I want to play around with the labels. I made it title case mainly because having text in all uppercase, it's a bit harder to read. And okay, let's add a little bit of some icons here. And one of the reasons why I wanted to add some icons here in the drop downs is to actually give us a visual cue of understanding these things are for locations, these things are for dates, these things are for like people, without immediately even having to read what the labels are. So think of these icons as supporting actors. So yeah, they feel too much, they're overpowering. So let's tone them down, turn down the opacity a bit. It's a bit gray. I want to stick with the branding color, so let's give it a bluish tint later on. So yeah, aside from the typography scale, I think the next thing that we need to do hand in hand too is to establish a spacing system. And what that means is to actually be consistent with your spacing. I'm using here a 4-point spacing, and this is how it would look. So there we go. So you can see every element or component here are spaced evenly and properly. You don't have magic numbers like 13 pixels. So what I'm using is a 4-point grid. So basically, I mean 4-point system, wherein all the spacing that I have is divisible by 4 pixels. And yeah, it just makes the layout feel more uniform and makes it look really consistent. So yeah. All right. So one of the things that I wanted to do too is to make the icons. I feel like it's popping up too much, like it's taking a lot of attention because of the color. So I just want to tone it down a bit, right? So that the main call to action, the button here, is much more focused. Okay, so tip number 7, overlap elements to create layers. Now, I think during the early days of the web, we're all used to this cookie cutter layout wherein every section is like a rectangle and there is just this visual cuts on each section. We want the layout to feel continuous and fluid. And one of the ways to do that is by overlapping elements. So we're gonna try to overlap this form here to the next section, so it's not divided, it feels continuous. That's one way of doing it. So you can see just a simple change and it makes a lot of difference. See? All right, now that looks a little bit awkward. There has to be some depth. So next step, we need to use shadows to create elevation. So you can imagine the sites not as being purely like flat. There is some depth. There are some elements that is nearer to you. There are some elements that are floating against the others to provide emphasis. So you can do that here. And one of the tricks to making really good shadows is by understanding how shadows work. And we can draw inspiration from nature itself. So you can see the vase here. There are 2 types of shadows being casted. One is the ambient light, which is the light being casted because of the pot. And there is a direct light, which means there is a separate light source from the right, which is casting this shadow here. So we can imagine that in the web as well. In front of the users, there is an ambient light of these elements looking directly at them. And then we could also create a direct light, which we could also decide could be coming from the top. So that would mean there's actually two shadow effects going on here to make that effect happen. So from this awkward overlap element into something that looking aesthetically pleasing. So you can see that it's actually floating now here above. And it's great for emphasis because this is the main jobs to be done for our customers. Their main call to action really is to book flights. So that's great that we focus that. Right. So next step, we create depth using colors. So creating depth, it's not limited to just using shadows in order to create depth. You can actually use the different tones of colors. Before starting a project, usually I set up my swatches here. For instance, I have my primary color and I have my neutral colors, which are different parts, which are different grays. When you think about it, an interface, it's mostly composed of grays, just different level of grays, different brightness. If you find it difficult to create your own color palettes, there are some good resources here like Tailwind CSS. You can actually use it pretty good. One of the things that I enjoy doing is to actually mix my own colors. So you can see here, I'm using a parametric color mixer. So you can check out the URL, colormixer.web.app. So what I usually do is I set up a base color, for instance, black, and then I I mix in a primary color like blue, and then I can immediately create a color scheme from light to dark using this kind of blue. So you can do all kind of stuff here. You can change the impact, how strong the blue is going to be integrated here in the black. You can even do blend modes or even the range for this. So yeah, this is actually a fun way to do um, color palettes. So applying it to our layout here, so you can see that I'm using white here for my floating panel here and white as well for my background. And even though there's a shadow, it feels like sometimes there is not enough depth. So we use color to create that depth. And by adding that simple light grayish blue hue over here, now it really feels that it's separated from the floating panel that I have compared to this one before. So super subtle changes, but yeah, it makes a lot of impact. Right. So moving on. Number 10, use fewer borders. So yeah, like what I did earlier. So just because it's a nav bar doesn't have to be a bar. Same goes for all of these different elements. Basically, everything at the web is a square. So we're trying to eliminate that with the board because every square has borders as well. So we're trying to reduce as much borders as we can. Otherwise, it's just gonna look like a wireframe. There's borders here on the text, and I think we can probably improve that. So instead of the text with borders, I would rather just write the actual content and have a supporting element there. Other than that, we still have these three boxy features here. Let's change that. So getting rid of the boxes, having features here and the icons. All right, so next step is to use whitespace. Again, I think I mentioned this earlier. Whitespace is really good. Helps you focus on what you want the user to consume. And it feels a bit crowded here, so we're going to introduce whitespace to make it free. So you can see how it makes all the difference here. Just adding whitespace makes the layout breathable. And one of the things I noticed here, there are some important call to actions, which is for them to download the mobile app. So maybe it probably deserves its own section. So I just created a section of its own. And then let's work on the footer here. There are some payment gateways here, and I think that's important to showcase that as well. So make it into its own separate section, put it there. Um, Not make it too attention grabbing. So third down the saturation, but having it there increases, like probably would increase customer confidence with when they're doing payments through this platform. So it's important to actually have that there. Right. So let's have some work here with the footer. Just rearrange it, and boom, there we go. So yeah, I think another tip would be to use good typefaces. Uh, Actually have a list of typefaces. It's still a work in progress, but you guys can screenshot it if you like. So this is a personal collection for hero sections or headings. If you want serif or sans serif, I think my personal favorite here would be graphic. Actually, I like graphic and Proxima Nova. For body text articles, Baskerville is a classic for body text if you're into serif. For sans serif, um, Open Sans and Source Sans is actually good. It's a Google font and it's free. You can use that. So for dashboards, these are for data-driven interfaces like these admin panels. Personal favorite would be Inter UI. It's actually really good and active graph test. So yeah, feel free to screenshot it, guys. So yeah, I noticed that all of the type here that we have is Roboto. There's nothing wrong with it. I just feel like it's overused, like it's everywhere. And it really depends on the brand book as well of the organization, but I wanna improve it a bit, so I'm using Inter UI as a typeface here, so you can see the difference here. It's much more rounder. It's not slim compared to Roboto. So yeah, I like this better actually. So yeah, that's the last step being applied here. So using those 12 tips, there's probably a lot more which I haven't covered, but just those 12 tips, it's already a lot. It's already a lot to really improve the interface that you have. This is how we went from this to that. And yeah, you can see the difference. Going down. Mhm. Yeah, so in summary, use good photos. You don't fill up the whole screen. Have consistent contrast. Have a type scale. Also a spacing system. Supercharge the defaults. Overlap elements. Great shadows, great elevation. There is depth. Using colors. Fewer borders, more white space, and good typefaces. So yeah, if you want to learn more about it, there are some really good resources here that I have resource links. So feel free to visit it, screenshot it, and yeah, enjoy learning and designing. So that's it for me. And thank you, everyone.
Hello guys, I'm Dominic Santiago, the co-lead of the 𝗦𝗂𝗂𝘀𝗂𝘀 Caloocan chapter. And I hope you're having a blast. I know that you enjoyed today's event as much as we did, like the whole chapter of the 𝗦𝗂𝗂𝗀𝗂𝘀. And looking back to Mr. Francis's lecture, what I learned was well, simply to be spontaneous at times. Like you don't have to follow everything what's already there. Like it exists for us to see what we can improve for a better user experience. And like what's pretty in the eyes. Yeah. And I hope you guys took notes and see the messages along the lines of Mr. Francis, because it's a really good head start for beginners like us. And with that, we'd like to express our gratitude to Mr. Francis Alturas for giving us the talk for the second day of Solution Challenge. And thank you very much, Sir Francis. We'll sure keep in mind to look at the cheat sheet you provided for us, or kind of like that. And to all our viewers today, make sure to comment the part that you liked at the lecture this afternoon. And for the participants or the explorers, don't forget to register for the third day of the Solution Challenge series. And for the upcoming events under machine learning. And we'll see you again on March 5th at 6 p.m. on our YouTube channel. So thanks for joining us today, guys. Goodbye.